You ever wonder why so many new businesses or, cool new products just vanish? Like they're everywhere one day and gone the next. Well, today we're going to unpack the book that tried to solve that exact problem. Eric Ries's Game Changer, The Lean Startup. This thing completely flips the script on how to build a business. It's all about cutting down that massive risk of failure and, actually building something that sticks around. So let's dive in.
All right, so here's the plan. First, we're going to hit the hard truth about startups. Then we'll get into the solution, which is something called validated learning. After that, we'll break down the core engine of this whole thing: build, measure, learn. We'll talk about your first experiment, the MVP, and then figure out what you should actually be measuring. And we'll wrap up with the big, tough choice every startup faces. Should you pivot or should you persevere?
Okay, first up, before we get into any solutions, we really need to face the big, scary problem that the lean startup was even created to tackle in the first place. Yeah, that quote, it just cuts right through all the hype, doesn't it? I mean, we all love the stories of the genius founder in a garage who succeeds through sheer willpower. But what Eric Rice is saying here is, look, passion and hard work, they're just not enough. The cold, hard reality is way, way tougher.
So why? Why do most of them fail? Well, here's the kicker. It's usually not because they couldn't build the thing. No, it's because they spent months, maybe even years, flawlessly building something that nobody wanted. Reese has this fantastic term for it: achieving failure. You have a perfectly engineered product, it works great, but there are zero customers. It's just a colossal waste of time, money, and all that passion.
Okay, so if the old way of just building it and hoping they'll come is totally broken, what do we do instead? Well, the book lays out a totally new approach. It's about treating entrepreneurship less like guesswork and more like a science. And to do that, we first have to kind of reset our definition of what a startup even is. It's not about the garage, it's not about being small. According to Reese, a startup is any organization trying to create something new under conditions of extreme uncertainty. Think about that. That means a small team inside a huge company launching a brand new product? Yep, they're a startup too. It's all about that uncertainty. And this leads to a really crucial point. The main goal of a startup isn't just to build stuff. It's not even just to make money, at least not at first. The number one goal is to learn. But we're not talking about any old learning. We're talking about validated learning. This is where you scientifically test your biggest ideas against reality with actual users to find hard proof of what they truly value. It's basically the perfect antidote to that nightmare scenario of building something nobody wants. So how do you actually get that validated learning? Well, you use the core engine, the absolute heart of the lean startup method. And here it is, the build, measure, learn feedback loop. It looks pretty simple, right? But this little loop is incredibly powerful. You start with your ideas. You build an experiment or a product to test them. You measure how real customers respond, and then you learn from that data, which then feeds back into your next set of ideas. The whole game here is speed. How fast can you go through one full cycle of this loop? So let's break that down a bit more. First, build. This means turning your ideas into some kind of product or experiment quickly. Then, measure. You get it in front of customers and see how they react, collecting real data. And this is key. It's not about asking them what they think in a focus group. It's about watching what they do. And finally, learn. You look at that data and ask, did this work? Did it prove our theory? And based on that answer, you face that critical choice. Do we keep going? Or is it time for a big change? All right, let's zoom in on that first step, the build phase. This is where we get to talk about one of the most famous and maybe most misunderstood concepts from the whole book, the MVP, or minimum viable product. Okay, let's get one thing straight right away. An MVP is not just a half-baked, buggy version of your final product. That's a huge misconception. Its real purpose is just one thing: to start the learning process. It is the absolute bare minimum thing you can build to get through that build, measure, learn loop just one time with the least amount of effort. And this really shows you the massive mindset shift we're talking about. The old way, you lock yourself away for a year, build this perfect, feature-packed product, and then have a huge, dramatic launch. The MVP way is the exact opposite. It says, get something out the door now. The goal isn't to be perfect. The goal is to get feedback as fast as humanly possible, just to find out if you're even pointed in the right direction. Want a perfect example of this? Think about Groupon. Before they were a billion-dollar company, what was their MVP? It wasn't some complex website. It was literally a WordPress blog. Seriously, they'd just post a 2-for-1 pizza deal, and if enough people said yes, the founders would manually create a PDF and email it to everybody. That's it. It was super simple, but it was just enough for them to learn the one thing they needed to know. Do people actually want this?
Okay, so you've got your MVP out there. People are using it. Now we hit the measure part of the loop. And honestly, this is where a ton of companies go completely off the rails because they start chasing the wrong numbers.
I mean, look at this chart. It looks amazing, right? Total users are going up and to the right, high fives all around. But this is what Reese calls a vanity metric. Sure, it looks good on a PowerPoint slide and makes everyone feel great, but it tells you basically nothing about whether your business is actually healthy. The whole point is to avoid what he calls success theater, just putting on a show that you're succeeding. Vanity metrics are for the show, but actionable metrics, those are for learning. An actionable metric is one that shows you a clear cause and effect. It helps you truly understand how your customers are behaving so you know what to do next. So, what are we talking about here? Well, instead of just counting total signups, you should look at your activation rate. What percentage of those people actually do the first critical thing in your app? Instead of just looking at today's traffic, look at your retention rate. How many people who signed up last month are still using your product today? These are the numbers that tell you the truth about your business's health. All right, so you've built something, you've measured it with the right metrics. Now you've arrived at the final and, frankly, the most important step in the loop. You learn. And what you learn forces you to make a really tough decision. Do you keep going down the same road, or is it time to make a big change? If the data is good, if your metrics show that your big idea was right, then you persevere, you double down, and you keep going. But if the data tells you that you were wrong, it's time to pivot. And a pivot is not the same thing as giving up. It's not failure. It's a smart, structured change in direction based on what you just learned. It's like keeping one foot on the ground while you move the other one to find a better spot. And this completely changes how you should think about your startup's runway. We always hear it's about how much cash you have left in the bank. But Reese argues your real runway is the number of pivots you can still make. It's the number of chances you have left to learn and change course before you run out of steam. That's a powerful idea, which really brings us to the final big takeaway. The whole lean startup philosophy teaches us that an experiment that fails isn't a failure, as long as you learn something from it. True failure is when you learn nothing. So the next time one of your projects or ideas doesn't go according to plan, the question to ask isn't, should I just give up? The real question is, okay, what did we just learn and what's the next pivot?